The drive to Lake Placid had always worked like medicine. Quiet roads, tall trees, my favorite playlist drifting through the speakers. I imagined the smell of pine when I opened the car door, the weight of the week dissolving as I stepped into my own space. Just 2 nights. Just me. I turned into the gravel driveway, tires crunching gently, but something was off. A red SUV I didn't recognize was parked beside the porch. A scooter leaned against the steps. The front door was wide open. I killed the engine and sat still for a beat. Maybe Reese dropped something off early. Maybe a neighbor laughter spilled from inside. Familiar, high-pitched, and out of place. I stepped out, keys still in hand, and climbed the steps. Inside the living room, my mother was arranging throw pillows like she was staging a real estate listing. My sister Celine walked in from the hallway with a bag of groceries, her youngest dragging a stuffed bear behind her. Marla looked up at me like I was the one interrupting. "You didn't say you were coming," she said flatly. "I wasn't planning to announce it. It's my house." Celine didn't even look surprised. She pulled a juice box from the grocery bag and handed it to her son. I glanced around the room. Suitcases in the hallway, a playpen in the sunroom, my books rearranged, my kitchen towels replaced. "I just needed the weekend," I said, voice steady. Marla crossed her arms. "They need more than a weekend. Celine and the kids are moving in. You've got your life in the city. This place makes more sense for them." Something in me paused like a door catching before the latch clicks. "You're moving them in." Without asking, Marla shrugged. "It's theirs now. You're not allowed here anymore." The words didn't land like a slap. They landed like silence, like something that had been waiting to happen. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood. I backed down the steps, the key still in my hand, now just metal with no meaning. By the time I reached the car, I had already decided I wouldn't fight them for the house. Not with words. Back in the city, I kicked my shoes off by the door and sat on the edge of the bed without turning the lights on. The hum of traffic outside felt jarring after the quiet of Lake Placid. My fingers still gripped the useless key warm from my palm. I dropped it into the drawer beside my bed, where it landed against receipts I hadn't been able to throw away. I pulled the blanket over my legs and reached for my phone, not to call anyone, just to scroll. Just to distract. But my photo gallery offered no comfort. There was the villa's porch at golden hour, the kitchen I'd designed tile by tile, the morning fog rolling off the lake. I closed it and opened my notes app instead. A few months ago, I'd started keeping a list. Not of expenses, but of things that didn't seem to count. Paid off Mom's dental debt $6,300, covered Celine's divorce lawyer $3,000 flat, down payment and renovation on the villa, every bonus check over 4 years, groceries when Mom forgot her wallet, babysitting Celine's kids while she reset emotionally. There was no line for thank you, no entry for we see you. I set the phone down and reached across the nightstand. My dad's old voice messages were still saved. I played the last one again, the one he'd left before his final hospital stay. His voice sounded tired but clear. "You've always had a strong heart, kid. Don't let them confuse it for a bottomless wallet. And don't teach them that kindness means silence." I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. If he were here, he'd have stopped them before they carried the first box inside. But he wasn't, and I hadn't. Maybe I'd taught them too well. That I'd show up, that I'd pay up, that I'd give up without needing to be asked twice. But the silence that followed this time didn't feel like surrender. It felt like planning. I reached over and opened my laptop, not to look at family photos, not to reminisce. I typed in the name of the attorney who'd helped me buy the villa. I'd been the responsible one since I was 9, not the oldest, just the one who never dropped the ball. When the electric bill was overdue, I figured out how to call the company from the landline and ask for a payment plan. When Celine lost her backpack, I gave her mine. When Mom forgot field trip forms, I forged her signature so I wouldn't miss the bus. By the time I turned 30, being the one who handled things wasn't a compliment. It was a sentence. I used to think they didn't notice, but they did. They just expected it. The last time I said no when Celine asked for help refinancing her car, I got 2 responses. Marla told me I was being selfish, that money made me cold. Celine texted, "You don't even have a family." What's it for? What was it for? I opened our message thread now, even though I knew it would sting. Marla's last text read, "They need it more. You're barely even there." I stared at those words. Not a question, not a request. A sentence carved like fact. I wasn't even a person in it, just a missing presence to be reassigned. What they called distance, I called breathing room. I'd built the villa because I needed a place that didn't ask, that didn't pull or shame or shift my worth depending on who needed what that week. And now they'd taken it as if all those years of showing up meant they were owed the one space I had made for myself. They'd forgotten something critical. I might have stayed quiet for years, but I hadn't stayed blind. I pulled up Lennox Hale's contact page and clicked Request Consultation. Then I attached a digital copy of the villa deed. Lennox Hale hadn't aged much since the last time I saw him. Still crisp shirt sleeves and sharp questions. He greeted me like I was another clean contract on his desk, not a woman 2 steps from severing her ties to her family. "I assume this is about the Lake Placid property," he said once we'd settled in. I nodded and slid the folder across the table. Deed copies, tax records, every invoice from the renovation. The folder was heavier than it looked, decades of quiet proof in paper form. "I want it secured," I said, "irrevocably. I want no one else to have access claim or leverage." He thumbed through the papers without speaking, then looked up. "Family matter?" I gave him a half smile. "Something like that." Lennox leaned back. "All right, we can transfer ownership to a nonprofit trust. I have clients who've done similar things, charitable housing orgs, ecological foundations. You retain lifetime use. They can't touch it without full legal pursuit, and even then, they won't win." I exhaled slower than I meant to. "We'll handle it cleanly." He continued flipping to a new page on his legal pad. "But document everything. Messages, voicemails, access attempts. Anything that shows coercion or intent. I've got screenshots," I said, "and a list." He glanced up. "A list of everything I've paid for, everything they say I don't need. Everything they forgot came from me." Lennox gave a small, satisfied nod. "Good. Because if this turns into a fight, we'll win it with facts, not feelings." I nodded and stood. "I don't want a fight." "No," he said evenly. "You want distance. That's harder to argue with, and more permanent." Outside, the spring air cut through my jacket, but I felt strangely grounded, not angry, not bitter. Just done. I pulled out my phone and opened the smart home app. Then I texted Reese. "You still good with Saturday? I've got a plan forming. We'll explain everything." Reese showed up in cargo pants and a hoodie that said "Trust issues about firewall enabled." He didn't ask many questions when I called, just asked for square footage and time frame. That's the thing about Reese. If you tell him the job requires creative deterrence, he starts loading his car with sensors and wires before you've explained who you're trying to keep out. We arrived just after noon on Saturday. The air was still damp from the night before, and the villa looked untouched, serene. Inside, nothing had been moved since I last left. They hadn't returned. Not yet. Full perimeter, Reese asked, unloading gear. Every room, every entry point. If it moves, I want the house to know. He grinned like I'd given him a birthday gift. By late afternoon, we had motion detectors in every hallway, programmable LED lights rigged to strobe in randomized pulses, and speakers hidden behind vents and inside wall panels. The voice assistant was custom scripted to issue warnings, escalate tone and loop phrases like "unauthorized access detected" and vacate the premises immediately. Reese installed pressure-sensitive mats beneath the rugs. One step in the wrong spot, and water would gush from the faucets. Lights would flash, and a recorded message would declare, "This property is protected by responsive deterrence." You are not welcome. We tested it all, walking from room to room, watching it react like a sentient organism. It was brilliant, unsettling, legal. You know, Reese said adjusting a ceiling-mounted sensor, this is technically a smart home demo. Nothing illegal about home automation. It's just enthusiastic. I nodded, walking to the front porch. I hung the new sign beside the door. Demo House Voice AI activated. Enter at own risk. It was clean, minimalist, and polished like a product launch. Not a threat. When we finished, Reese packed up and gave me a thumbs up. If they stay more than 3 minutes, I'll be disappointed. They won't. I watched his car disappear down the road before opening the app on my phone. All systems green, cameras live, triggers armed. The villa had always been mine, but now it had a voice that sounded an awful lot like mine too. I slid the phone into my coat pocket and turned back toward the door, already knowing who would come next and when. They pulled up right on schedule Saturday at noon. The live feed showed Celine stepping out first, holding a casserole dish like it was a housewarming gift to herself. Her husband, Craig, followed behind with a cooler and 2 of the kids both dragging overnight bags. Marla climbed out last, adjusting her purse and scanning the porch with narrowed eyes. The sign caught her attention immediately. She walked over, read it, and scoffed. Demo House Voice AI activated. Enter at own risk. I watched her lips move as she turned to Celine and said something. Celine laughed loud and dismissive. Marla reached up, grabbed the sign by its screws, and yanked it clean off the post. She tossed it to the side like garbage. "This is our house now," she said. Loud, like she wanted the porch to hear. They didn't knock. Craig used the spare key I hadn't realized Celine still had. They walked right in, smiles and jokes, kids already bickering about which room would be theirs. I sat in my apartment, feet tucked under me, phone in hand. Everything had been ready since Thursday. I'd tested the sequences, checked every sensor, every audio file. All I had to do was wait. I muted the feed and left for a walk around the block. By the time I got back, the kids were asleep in the guest room. Celine and Craig were curled up in the master bed like they'd earned it. Marla was in the sunroom with a magazine and a glass of wine that I'd bought. At 1:55 a.m., I watched Marla turn out the last light and head toward the guest bathroom. I opened the app. A soft tone pulsed across the screen. Ready. My thumb hovered for only a second. Then I tapped activate. The lights in the hallway flared to life, pulsing red and white. The living room speakers came on first. Unauthorized access detected. Bathroom faucets turned on. Kitchen lights flashed like sirens. Footsteps echoed through the speakers. Mine pre-recorded, paced slow and steady. And upstairs, the hallway camera caught Celine bolting upright, already screaming. The villa responded exactly as we designed it to. Lights in every room strobed in unpredictable intervals, washing the walls in red, then white, then a pulsing blue that made the shadows look like they moved on their own. The hallway speakers looped my voice low and distorted. "You are not welcome here. Exit immediately." By 2:01 a.m., the first child was crying. The youngest screamed when the bathroom faucets shot to life, spraying the mirror like something unseen had yanked the handles. Craig tried the front door, but the delay on the smart lock kept it sealed just long enough for panic to settle in. Upstairs, Celine yelled over the noise, trying to herd her kids out of the bedroom. She tripped on a motion trigger in the hallway, and the voice changed, security protocol escalating. "Leave now!" In the sunroom, Marla stumbled backward, her drink crashing to the floor as the overhead speakers hissed a breathy whisper. "This is not your home!" The hallway camera caught her reaching for the walls like they might stop spinning. Celine grabbed her by the wrist and dragged her toward the kitchen. The lights there blinked in a fast, unnatural rhythm, and the ceiling projector cast long shadows across the countertops, shadows that didn't match anyone in the room. By the time they got the front door open, everyone was shaking. No one had shoes on. The kids were still crying. They piled into the car and backed down the driveway, fast and crooked gravel kicking up behind them. At 6:12 a.m., 2 officers knocked politely on the door. One walked through every room with a flashlight. The other watched the security monitors. They left half an hour later. The report said no signs of forced entry, no occupants on site. Smart system possibly malfunctioning. At 7:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I answered anyway. "What did you do?" Marla's voice cracked. I sipped my coffee and looked out the window. Nothing, I said. I wasn't even there. I ended the call before she could respond. Then I opened the app and tapped reset sequence just in case they tried again. They came into the notary office like they still had a chance to win. Marla, with her lips pressed tight, Celine, 2 steps behind, arms folded across her chest like she was holding in a monologue. Craig didn't come, neither did the kids. Just the 2 of them, convinced this would end in some forced compromise. Bradley the notary greeted them professionally and gestured to the seats across from me. Papers already sat stacked in front of him. He looked calm. I felt the same. Marla didn't bother with small talk. "So, let's stop playing games." Celine leaned forward. "We want to discuss next steps regarding the house. You've made your point." Bradley nodded and turned to me. I slid the top document toward them. "The villa is no longer mine," I said evenly. "Ownership was transferred 2 weeks ago to Eastview Housing Collective, a nonprofit that supports transitional housing for women. I retain lifetime access and no other party has any legal claim." Celine's mouth opened, but no sound came. Marla's face turned sharp. "You transferred it," she hissed. "I did." "You'll regret this," Marla said. "One day when you're alone and need us," I cut her off. "You gave it away without asking." "I just made it official." Bradley flipped through the next form explaining the time-stamped record of the deed transfer and notarized signature. Celine's eyes glazed over, but her hands clenched. "You could have talked to us first," she said. "We thought it was temporary." "No," I said. "You thought I wouldn't push back. You thought I'd swallow it like always." Marla stood up too quickly, knocking her chair back. "That place was supposed to be for family." "It was," I said quietly. "But family doesn't strip the name off the door and pretend it was theirs all along." They left without another word. Bradley slid the remaining paperwork toward me for final signature. I signed, passed it back, and stood up. "Thank you," I said. Outside, the air was clear. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without bracing. I checked my phone. Nothing from Marla, nothing from Celine. Just a notification from the villa's security app. All systems idle. No activity detected. I arrived just after sunrise. The gravel crunched under the tires the same way it always had, but this time I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't brace myself for who might be inside. The only car in the driveway was mine. The lock turned smoothly. The kind of quiet welcome that doesn't ask where you've been or who you had to become to get here. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and a little bit of dust. Nothing was out of place. I spent the morning pulling down everything recent I had installed. Motion sensors, strip lights, speakers tucked into corners, the projector in the hallway that once made shadows dance where nothing moved. I labeled each piece carefully, packed it into a box, and set it aside for return. The house didn't need to speak anymore. It had already said what I hadn't been allowed to. Loud enough to echo. I made coffee not because I needed the caffeine, but because the sound of the percolator had always made the place feel like mine. I used the mug with the chip in the handle, the one Dad used to call Lucky. He never explained why. He just smiled when it was clean again. Outside, the porch caught the early light. I sat in the chair he built, the one with the armrest that still creaked when you leaned too hard. I wrapped both hands around my coffee and let the steam blur my view of the trees. No one was shouting. No one was asking for anything. No one was waiting for me to cave. I wasn't proud of what I did. But I wasn't sorry either. They had come to take something I'd built alone. I didn't lock them out with rage. I just gave the house permission to say what I couldn't. I took a slow sip, then whispered into the morning, "Not revenge. Just return." The lake glittered in the distance like it knew something I didn't. I sat there until the coffee cooled, not needing to answer to anyone, not even myself. Then I stood up and walked back inside.